Accept our thanks for this glorious day and all of its blessings. We ask for your guidance, strength, and wisdom in our deliberations this evening. May we be challenged to make this world and community a better place. In your Son's name we ask this blessing. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a quorum. Announcements?
Thank you. I do have a few announcements. The first is that you will have received notice of a community meeting that was scheduled for tomorrow evening, Thursday the 18th, and that meeting is canceled. It was a proposed rezoning of land that is between the Mall Ring Road, or the Spotsylvania Town Center Ring Road, and Bragg Road. The applicant has decided not to move forward with that rezoning, and they have canceled their community meeting for tomorrow evening. You should have received an email or a printout of a notice from Dominion about a project that they're moving forward with that will come before the Planning Commission for public hearing. They have an 8.2-mile stretch of utility easement within the county with 2 lines running through it right now. They are upgrading one of the 2 lines, replacing the poles. All the work is within the existing right-of-way, but they're holding an open house to review that project on March 15th from 5 until 8 at James Monroe High School at 2300 Washington Avenue in Fredericksburg. That project traverses Spotsylvania as well as Fredericksburg and a couple of other counties. And then finally, on March 2nd, in the planning update, I had noted that Goodwin Cove in the Livingston voting district was going to be at public hearing. The applicant has requested to postpone that public hearing to a future date. So unless one of the items from this evening is continued to March 2nd, under new business, the Planning Commission can consider canceling that meeting.
I think the Planning Commission would support that. Anything else?
That's it.
I trust everybody's had a chance to review the minutes. Any comments on the minutes? I'll take a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Vote. The motion is approved. Minutes are accepted. Any unfinished business at this point? Let's move on to the public hearings. SUP 15-0007.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Patrick White, Planning Department, Spotsylvania County. The case before you is SUP 15-0007. It is a special use application on behalf of Network Building and Consulting. It's located in the Cortland Voting District. The applicants request a special use approval for a 150-foot tall wireless telecommunication tower with a 5-foot lightning rod on top. The tower is proposed within a 75 by 75-foot equipment area and is located, or is proposed on a property zoned R1. The tower and the equipment area itself are proposed on tax parcel 23A105, which is 227 acres. Access to that tower is provided through tax parcel 23A105A, a 79-acre R1 zoned property. That access will be provided through an existing driveway onto Harrison Road. Both of these properties are owned by Hazelwild Farm Educational Foundation. Staff reviewed this case and found that the proposal will increase telecommunication coverage by Verizon as well as 3 other carriers. Staff opines that the tower is well sited on a large privately owned property, 2 in fact. The tower may still be visible from nearby residential structures, although they are approximately 1,000 feet away. The State Historic Preservation Officer opined no adverse direct nor visual impact on any historic properties. The proposal meets the comp plan, was recommended for approval by the Cable, Television, and Telecommunication Commission, and county consultant, Atlantic Technology Consulting Incorporated. So here's an aerial of these two properties. They're addressed at 5325 Harrison Road. The larger property to the north has an unassigned address. As I mentioned earlier, the larger one is 227 acres, and the smaller to the south, 79 acres. This black square indicates an approximate location of the tower. Our zoning map, as you can see, does indicate that the properties are both zoned R1, and the future land use map indicates the larger of the two properties has a mixed-use future land use designation. The property to the south, an open space future land use designation. This is an excerpt from page 1 of the applicant's supplied GDP. You'll note that the proposed tower is 900 feet from the property line to the east, over 2,300 feet from the north, over 1,775 feet to the west, and 2,253 feet approximately from the southern property line. Harrison Road runs along the southern property line and Interstate 95 along the east. GDP depicts a 155-foot fall zone. This is a tower that does not or is not proposed to have any breakpoints in it. And the access to the tower is proposed via a 20-foot access easement, again, to an existing driveway. As I mentioned earlier, the tower is proposed within a 75 by 75-foot equipment area. That equipment area will be enclosed with a 7-foot high fence topped with 1 foot of barbed wire. A 100-foot tree save area is plotted around the tower itself. There are not a significant amount of trees in there. Staff asked the applicant to supplement them, and the applicant agreed. They proposed evergreen trees. The exact planting specifications were not noted. Staff has some recommendations for that in the conditions section of your report. The tower itself, as I mentioned, 150 feet tall with a 5-foot lightning rod. Verizon is online to be the first locator on the tower, and there's room in the equipment area and on the tower for 3 additional carriers. This is a photograph or photo simulation from the southernmost, I guess, the entryway to the Hazelwild area. You can barely see the tower. As I mentioned previously, that's a distance of probably about over 2,200, at least 2,250 feet away. The next photo simulation is from a little further inside the property where the tower is more visible. This is a photo simulation from the Kingswood Boulevard, the Kingswood neighborhood to the east across. Does not depict the tower. And a simulation from the approximate intersection of Glen Eagles Drive and Hazel Court. Again, at the time this photo was taken with the full trees, the tower was not visible. Staff requests propagation maps or signal strength maps to be provided for these cases. This is an image or a map without the proposed tower. Notice the Salem Drive label in the middle. And with a 150-foot tower, this is their expected improvement in signal coverage from just Verizon. Previously mentioned that we had received correspondence from the State Historic Preservation Officer confirming the applicant's NEPA documentation's assertion that there would be no adverse effect on historic properties. They did find 2 artifacts when through the course of shovel testing. Staff has placed a condition in accordance with the recommendation by their cultural consultant. Additionally, there's a very slim but nonetheless possible chance that one of the trees that would be removed for the installation of this tower could be a roost tree for a long-eared bat. Staff has, again, conditioned this case accordingly. The Fish and Wildlife Commission recently released a new rule enhancing protection for the long-eared bat, and I believe that our condition adequately protects that.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Make a comment on that.
All right.
According to that information you gave us is sometimes during the year that these trees cannot be disturbed or the area cannot be disturbed because they're having pups. The baby bats are called pups, and it would disrupt the pup season. I think this is an important subject. I mean, we've just got a new mosquito-carrying disease that's going to be here in this country soon if it's not already here. And I think we need to protect any species, natural species that will combat the mosquito population. I don't have a problem with the tower being built, but like I said, the information you gave us said at certain times of the year that no construction or disturbance at all can take place. I would assume that we would have someone to monitor that to make sure that didn't happen.
The new rule is specific to roost trees or trees that are within a
Right.
certain distance
Right,
of.
I understand.
Provided that the tree is not in either of those situations, they could remove those trees at any
I
time.
understand.
So, okay, all right,
Thank you.
thank you. Staff attended a community meeting that the applicant held on April 23rd. There were approximately 8 to 10 residents. The primary concern was the radio frequency radiation. Staff has received one letter of objection from a nearby property owner. The subject case was recommended by the Cable TV and Telecom Commission for approval and is recommended for approval by staff with the 6 conditions in your report. At this time, I welcome any questions or will queue up the presentation of the applicant.
Yes, you mentioned the radiation or whatever that is. Can we possibly get some authority to tell us whether that's real or not real?
I believe that we have, yeah.
Because
we
I
can get some
understand
discussion
that
on
there
that.
is radiation, but I also understand that it's not harmful because of the, well, you've got someone who's going to speak to that, and we'll just hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hear from the applicant.
Thank you very much. My name's Timothy Dwyer from Network Building and Consulting. We're agents for Verizon Wireless. I appreciate you guys hearing us tonight. I have with me as well Michael Fisher. He's an RF specialist, licensed engineer from Millennium Engineering. Next slide. I'm going to be very brief in my presentation, and I'll let Michael speak to what Mr. Thompson was speaking of, because Patrick did a very good job of explaining this. But we're just basically doing a 150-foot monopole with a 5-foot lightning rod. This is a good opportunity to fill a gap in coverage for Verizon Wireless to the neighborhood to the north and to the west, as well as the I-95 corridor, as well as the opportunity for other co-locators, T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, if they see fit to come on this tower. It will avoid the possibility of them having to build another tower in this highly residential area. Next slide. Again, that's just a picture of the compound. Verizon will agree to provide any buffering that this board requires. Next slide. Just to give you an idea, this is an aerial view. That is an exact location of the tower per the GPS coordinates where that little pin is. Again, this is buffered by a lot of trees. Based on our photo simulations and based on my own experience being out there, this is a really good place for a cell site, just based on aesthetics alone, let alone the need for the site for Verizon Wireless. It's set back very far from Hazelwild, or from Harrison Road, and the main visibility is from 95, which that's pretty much a good thing. Next slide, please. This is where again, Patrick showed you some photo simulations. These are the points where they were taken from. You get a good idea where our viewpoints there. Next slide. Again, that's probably the most visible you're going to get if you're not on the property, and that's a pretty good, at 2,300 feet from Harrison Road, and it's basically just a little bleep on your radar. Next slide. That's on the farm. Patrick showed you that one as well. Next slide. No visibility from the neighborhood right there. Next slide. Same as this viewpoint as well.
When you say no visibility, that's year-round, or is that just during?
That's year-round. When we fly the balloon, I think we flew it for a couple days here, and they go out and make sure, if they would have spotted that balloon, they would have put an arrow to it as well. And I have pictures of the balloon itself, and they're not visible in those locations. They were only visible in the 2 photos I showed you. Next slide. I'm going to have my RF consultant come up and speak to Mr. Thompson's questions as well as the need for coverage.
Good evening again. My name is Michael Fisher, Fischer, with the firm Millennium Engineering. With regards to the question about radiation or electromagnetic field exposure, yeah, any transmitting antenna, there will be radiating electromagnetic fields. However, exposure is really a product of your proximity to the antennas at 150 feet above ground level, where the antennas will be. Verizon will be in strict compliance with the FCC's exposure limits. The FCC has 2 exposure limits that they have set with respect to recommendations from worldwide organizations that have studied this for years. The one is occupational, the other is general population. For any of the residents in the area, anyone at ground level, on the farm, the more strict general population limits would come into play. And even at those stricter limits, we're going to be thousands of times below what the FCC has deemed as, safe levels of exposure to electromagnetic fields. So if the FCC allows, up to 100% of their limit, we're going to be many times below 1%. Hopefully that answers your question with respect to that.
Yes, it does answer my question, but the general population still has a great fear of these things. And I'm with you on this. I agree that this is a minimum risk all the way around, but is there some kind of official documentation that maybe we could have?
I mean, our firm
for
could
the
provide,
future?
yeah, I mean, our firm could provide a certification letter if that would appease the board. I mean, we provide these, for cell sites, routinely, every day. I mean, we do this. We've done
I would like
thousands
to
of
have that.
sites.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll speak very briefly to the need for the site. You can stand up. So, referencing the plot on the screen, I have a blown-up exhibit here that I printed out. Very briefly, in the center of the plot, where there's a light blue dot, Salem Drive is the internal Verizon Wireless site name. That's the location of our proposed facility, subject to this application. It kind of sits in the middle of multiple existing Verizon sites in the area. To the west is the Verizon, they call it the Plank site. To the north, Central Park. To the east, Harris Mill, and to the south, Fredericksburg. This site, again, will sit in the middle of these. It's a dual-purpose site. These sites have a finite capacity. They can only handle so many wireless calls or data sessions. So this site is going to, while it's going to provide additional coverage in the area along Plank Road, along Harrison Road, along Salem Church Road, along I-95, and in the residential neighborhoods in the area, it's also going to draw capacity from the other existing sites in service today. So while we're going to improve coverage in the area, we're also going to improve, call quality, diminish the possibility for drop calls or block data sessions, because we're going to provide more capacity to the area, especially during busy hours when the existing sites may not be able to provide that amount of capacity for all the users. We flip. So again, this is a repeat of what we saw previously. The blue, green, and red area around the proposed facility, that's showing what the proposed coverage will look like from this facility. As you move away from the site, obviously the power level decreases, hence the 3 colors. So the blue areas would be the strongest signal level, then green would be the next strongest, and then red, it diminishes as you go out. But again, we're going to fill in our coverage gap while also pulling capacity from the existing surrounding sites. I can take any questions if anyone has any.
I have one question. I think this question's been asked more than one time, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. When you went out trying to find a location of this tower, aren't there towers within a mile of this site already? I know there's one at the convenience center.
Probably the closest one is the Plank site, which is on county land.
Right.
Verizon's on that currently, but that site, as was shown on these propagation maps, doesn't quite reach out to the level. And I mean, Michael can talk a little bit more about it, but as more and more people use data, the distance between sites becomes smaller. As the capacity of these networks, when it fills up, I think we had a meeting and a woman said to us, well, I used to live 40 miles from a cell tower 10 years ago and I could get calls. Times have changed. 10 years ago, we didn't have data. We didn't have people streaming videos. So I think that has a lot to do with the fact that you're seeing a little bit closer to each other, but they have to be far enough away not to interfere. And this was an ideal site. I think originally we looked at the Salem Church site, which is just north of here. That site didn't provide a very good buffer for the neighbors, and it was very, very close, and it wasn't as big of a property as this one is. So as we move south, Verizon could still get the coverage and face north and provide this white area and really provide coverage in that area. So that's why we're here.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I ask a question, Mr.
Certainly,
Chairman?
Certainly.
You stated that you had to be a certain distance, you should be a certain distance from other towers. What is that distance?
Yeah, sure. Well, the reason you have to be a certain distance is every site is using the same frequencies. Verizon has they operate in 4 different license frequency bands. The FCC owns the licenses, and Verizon uses the license the FCC provides them. Because every site uses the same frequencies, they have to be a certain distance away so the sites aren't interfering with each other. If you put 2 sites right next to each other, the signals using the same frequencies will just blast into each other essentially and interfere, and you'll cause more problems than you're doing any good. There's no defined distance you can be away. I mean, in downtown, I live in Philadelphia. In downtown Philadelphia, you have sites every few blocks because there's so much capacity needed in that area that you need a lot of sites to provide the coverage and capacity. In a more rural area, you're going to have sites, maybe 2 miles apart. So there's no hard and fast rules for how the distance between sites. But the reason that you have to have, especially with the new, you've heard the term 4G LTE, that technology, you don't want too much overlap. You want like just very little overlap because that technology especially does not like interference. So you want these sites to basically be far enough apart that they're not interfering, but close enough that there's a little overlap so that if you're driving in your car passing from one site into the next, your phone can hand off to that site. But again, you don't want the sites too close to each other where you're causing detrimental interference and, causing call drops or blocking your data session. So hopefully that answered your question. I mean, there's no set
Yes.
rules,
No set rules.
right, but, there's, depending on the area, depending on the number of users, that kind of determines the distance that the sites will be apart from each other.
Okay. The interference, then, it doesn't come in to play with that. I mean, doesn't come in to make a difference because of the data that you have of people using that. Am I correct?
No, interference is a major issue. You don't want, for instance, you don't want the Plank site to the west. You don't want that site, the signal from that site and the signal from our new site overlapping too much, because in that overlap, your cell phone's going to see, or your handset or your tablet is going to see a strong signal from 2 different sites, and it's going to cause interference, and you're not going to get a good user experience. You kind of just want a very small overlap, so there's a specific strongest serving site wherever you are. There's going to be a little overlap so that you can hand off from one site to the next, but the interference issue comes in when you have too much overlap.
How do you know when that you have enough data or enough people using that and not overload? How do you measure that?
You mean, how do we determine when a site is
Yeah.
reaching its limit?
Yes.
Well, there's
That's
a
right.
whole system performance unit, a department within Verizon Wireless that is constantly measuring, drop calls, user complaints, number of users. These sites are divided into sectors. So if this sector of antennas is reaching its limit or reaching its maximum capacity, that they know the direction that sector is pointing, we're going to need an additional facility, additional cell site in that area to pull some of that capacity. So that's kind of what's happening in this area. There's
Okay.
4 sites around.
Okay,
The sectors pointing to this area are kind of reaching their limit. So we need a new site to provide coverage and also to pull capacity from those sites.
that answers my question. Very good. Thank you.
I have just, any other questions? From a public health standpoint, would you say, what would you say the risk to the public health is in the surrounding communities with the presence of this tower?
I mean, I'm an engineer, I'm not a doctor. All I can speak to is really whether Verizon's antennas will comply with what the FCC has deemed as safe levels of human exposure to electromagnetic fields. I can say that they'll be in strict compliance with that by a substantial margin. The FCC would be the body that has established the standards, and they're the ones that really say, these are what we consider safe.
And I
so,
think I
yeah,
heard, I think I heard you say that at the communities, this would be many, many times lower than that limit.
Yes, I mean, once you get, 10, 20 feet from an antenna, with standing in the main beam, you're really, at that point, in compliance. I do measurements on rooftop sites all the time where I'm standing directly in front of the antennas. So it's really proximity to the antennas and how close you are is what, where your exposure level is going to rely on. It's not really the power level that's coming out of the antenna, it's really your proximity to the antenna in combination with the power. But,
So the risk dramatically decreases within feet, just a few feet.
oh yeah, as you move, every foot you move away, the power, or the power density is decreasing, many times.
So at 2,000 feet away,
Yeah, I mean, if I were to
there's
take
probably more risk with the
Oh,
cell
yeah.
phone than there is the tower. Is that a
Yeah, I
fair
mean, the
statement?
exposure from your Wi-Fi router or your baby monitor is going to be higher than what you're getting from this, cell site.
All right, one more question, Patrick. You mentioned 2 sites. I want to be clear. This is on one site with access through another site. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Recently, I read that the competitor to Verizon is coming out and testing 5G. And as more and more, I assume the frequency bands for those are going to be different, obviously, than their current bands. And my question is, are we going to need more and more density as we begin to have quicker access to data, faster speeds, things of that nature, similar to going from 2.4 to 5 gigahertz in your Wi-Fi, your area shrinks. Is that going to be the case? Has any study been done on that to where we're going to see more and more towers going up as our speeds increase, potentially?
You're probably going to see reuse of frequencies they have. For instance, 850 megahertz is what the original, Verizon and AT&T used for cellular. Verizon now is using their 700 megahertz, 1900 megahertz, 2100 megahertz for 4G. 850 is not being used for that yet. Eventually, 850 will be used for that, and other frequencies they have that are currently being used for 4G may be switched to 5G. You are correct. The lower the frequency, the further the signal will travel. There's going to be a need for a lot more sites because the more devices that come on the network, obviously the more demand increases, and you need more sites to handle the capacity. Verizon's building a lot of what are called small cells, which you may see in like a shopping center in a high-density area. They're built much lower to the ground, 10, 20 feet above ground. You might see them on light poles in downtown areas. They operate at very low power. They only cover a few hundred feet. So there's some of the new, solutions that Verizon's using for that. So yeah, I mean, you're going to see more sites as to, if the number of sites are going to exponentially increase as we move to 5G. I can't really, that would be speculation at this point, because we're still a few years out from that.
Anything else? All right, thank you. At this point, we'll open it up for the public. Do we have no one signed up? Anybody that not signed up that wishes to speak at this point? Very well. I think at this point, we can move forward with a vote on this. Before we take a motion on it, I would like to say that in regards to cell towers, we've had this issue come up in other applications. And with today's technology, the first responders rely on this technology, and I can tell you, a year and a half ago, I had a personal experience with this where if it was not for the cell phone call, I'm not so sure that the first responders could have located a family member. So through this technology, it's very important, and I fully support this application, and I would think the panel would too, the commission would too. So with that, I would take a motion on it, if you have one.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve this application, but I would also like to add that whatever we have to do to monitor the bat situation would be taking place.
And the motion includes the 6 conditions, is that, do I understand that correctly? There are 6 conditions to this application, and the motion would need to carry the 6 conditions, is that?
If the commission wishes that they carry those conditions, it should recommend that it do so.
That's what I would suggest. Thank you.
Very good. So with that motion, I would take a second.
Second.
All in favor, let's vote. Motion to approve. It is unanimous, the motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If I may, I
Yes,
may
sir.
be speaking out of turn. This may be new business. Ms. Reeves is here. I would like to have her speak to us, if she would. I have some questions. Is that all right? Can we do that, or is that a new business?
I consent to do that.
Very well, we'll do that.
Good evening.
Yes, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
But I
I'm
thought
used
you
to
were
it.
going to speak, so I could ask you questions then, but I'll do it now. The county owns several pieces of property dotted all over the county.
That is correct.
Are there any cell towers? How many cell towers are on county property as we speak?
I do not have that number, but there is a substantial number of county sites that have co-locators, and then there are other sites that have tower owners that have leased that property from the county. I can get you that exact number, but there is a number throughout the county that are on county property.
And, well, I'll ask you a question. You probably don't know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you have any idea the rental fees that are involved here?
Yes, we.
What range are they in?
We collect about $400,000 a year through co-location, through lease agreements through the county, and we're constantly moving new ones through. We're working on 2 new ones now. The average lease agreement per month is about $3,500 per month,
Right.
Depending on the location.
And are there any of these cell towers located on school property?
There are tanks that belong to the, water tanks that
Mm-hmm.
belong to the county on school property on which our service providers co-locate. But to my knowledge, and I have to make sure that I validate this, I do not believe there are any towers currently on school property.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is there a reason, do you know, Ms. Reeves, that there's not locations on school properties? I mean, have we had requests for that to be?
I know that there is a requirement, and I'll leave this to Mrs. Parrish to address. There's a requirement in the pre-planning process to evaluate county-owned properties, which would include school properties. I think I'd have to defer to Mrs. Parrish to respond to that because that's part of the process that her office goes through. I can tell you right now that there is a request going to the school board shortly to put a tower behind one of the elementary schools for the public safety radio system. So while there is none currently, if the school board approves, we should have one soon sitting behind Cedar Forest Elementary School.
If that takes place, then the school board, school system, would receive the funds from that, am I correct?
No, ma'am, no, ma'am. What we do typically, and this is not approved by the school board, I want to stress, this is still in process, but we would actually get a deed of dedication as we do for our water tanks, so that the county would basically be given the property to build the tower. We would own the tower, we would maintain the tower, and if there was any co-location on that tower, the county would receive the property into the general fund, not the schools. There are a couple situations where there is a tower at a water tank. I think it's right down here at Cortland, where let me try to get this straight. The county has the lease from the schools to have their water tank there. But that is the one instance where the schools actually receive the revenue from co-locators on that tower that was built by a service provider. But it's on technically county-owned property because it's been leased or dedicated to us. So it's a little bit of a fine line. It's right over there beside Cortland High School.
That is our fine line, because you're leasing from yourself, and then,
There is no cost. There is no cost to this. And I will just simply tell you that in my dealings with the schools over the last several years in this endeavor, they have been very, very amenable to placement of towers on their property if there is a place to put the tower. But I believe that most of the tower sightings that have been requested by service providers, the only one that comes to mind is out at Riverbend High School. There was some discussion about whether a tower belonged out there or not, and I think that the service provider selected another site.
well, I do question, and I do ask, those questions. School systems can use all the funding that they can get. And I listened last night to the budget process. And every penny that they get goes into the education of our young children. And if there is no danger, and Greg asked the questions a few minutes ago about, the sites and how they were as far as health and whatever. And we got good answers from them. Do you agree with those answers?
Yes, ma'am. The FCC actually puts out a rather lengthy document that I believe that the RF engineer was referring to that defines how that RF coverage affects people who are around the tower. And they've got pretty strict refinements about how those, basically the higher the antenna is on the tower, the less chance of there being any side effects from that. So I do agree with what the engineer stated earlier.
Of course, I know that we do not control the funds for the school system. I realize that. And when I said a few minutes ago that the school system could use all the funding to put in education for our students. But however, it doesn't seem as though that it's a fine line somewhere that they might not receive that. It would go into the county's coffers.
The exchange, Mrs. Carter, is simply that we actually support the schools through other endeavors. There's
I know
shared
that.
services, and I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes, I am.
They are actually a very large portion of our public safety radio system. So in exchange for that, we typically manage the lease agreements. We manage all the maintenance of the sites. And I cannot address it further as to how the funding goes.
I understand.
I just know that that is how we do it currently.
I'll leave that to the Cable Commission and you.
Mr. Chairman, Jane, you're talking about the water tanks, which are for public safety, correct?
No, the water tanks are not used for public safety. They're used for just water throughout the county.
But
We do have a water tank currently right now here at the courthouse that's used as our control point, but that goes away with the new radio system.
well, I guess the towers that you said earlier, that we do have some towers on school.
We are planning on a new tower on school property specifically for the public safety radio system. It's going to be built specifically for that.
Right. But I guess my question, listen to Ms. Carter, if a private company, such as Verizon or whoever came in and wanted to put a tower up on the school property, then the school would receive that money for rent from.
Correct. Unless
So
they,
not the county.
unless they opted to turn it over to us to manage and maintain the lease agreement and control, and it's a great deal of work to manage those lease agreements. And the schools have typically turned that over to us to manage because it is an extremely extensive endeavor to manage those lease agreements and the vendors.
They have to turn it over.
They do not have to.
They do not
have the
have to.
They have the
Okay.
option to do so, yes.
Okay.
Well, personally, I like to see all these towers on county-owned property, every single one of them. We're missing a golden opportunity to alleviate the pain for the taxpayers by having these things on county property. But I also understand that the coverage has to be what the coverage has to be.
I had occasion to speak with Verizon on another site that's close to this. They are currently, as the applicant stated, on our Chancellor Tower. There's a monopole out there beside the 500-foot tower that they exist on. We're also working with them on co-locating on the water tank off of Levels Road. And I cannot tell you what the name of the elementary school is, but it's right there off of Levels Road, right beside L'Oreal Park. And then this tower will be the third. So there is a coverage capacity issue that I believe that we're going
Right.
to address, along with some small cell site technology that I know that we're working to expand capacity as well as coverage.
So what you've said to us tonight is that schools aren't automatically adverse to having a tower.
In my experience with them, working with them over the last couple of years, they have been amenable to working with service providers to identify county sites, including schools, to co-locate if it's possible to do so.
Okay, thank you.
May I?
Absolutely.
I'd like to know exactly from the school sites what the county is receiving from these towers and from these locations. We speak, as Mr. Thompson, I believe, stated about the taxpayers, but however, I think we have to be fair, that if they got school sites, then I would maybe, it's not up to me. But however, I would just like to know that, what they receive.
We can send you that. It gets down into general fund versus the utilities fund versus the school fund, but we can send that to you down in a breakdown, and I'll send it through.
And how many people do you have to hire to do all of that?
I've already got it available for you, Mrs. Carter.
I'm sorry.
It's a bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy, you're right, there you go.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. That was just great information. I think.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. At this point, we can move on to the second application.
The case now before you is SUP 150008. It is a special use application for the Nut Tree Kennel. It's located in the Livingston Voting District. The applicants are requesting a special use approval for a kennel in an agricultural A3 zoning district. The kennel is proposed on tax parcel 58A24. It's 28.9 acres. Address at 11712 Post Oak Road within the Livingston Voting District. Access will be provided to the kennel through an existing driveway, which will need to be widened pursuant to this proposal. Staff reviewed the case and found the following: that the property was formerly used as a dog breeding facility for many years. I was able to find aerial imagery from 1994 depicting the kennel. I didn't have any aerials before that. The Spotsylvania zoning code was adopted in 1995, and perhaps that explains why I was not able to locate a certificate of use for the original facility. This existing structure is proposed to be enhanced with new equipment, including heating and noise management. The applicant owns the property. There's a single-family residence on the property that the applicant will reside in, which staff opines will increase neighborhood relations, as they'll hear should anything get out of line, they'll be the first to know. The applicant requests are noted in their GDP narrative that the property will be limited to no more than 50 dogs and 20 cats. Although pets will be monitored and kept inside during evening hours, kennels create noise. Staff opines that the noise created should be well buffered on the sides, and I believe you'll see that on the GDP. One of the questions that came up previously was whether or not a special kennel permit was required. I spoke with our animal control manager, Tidings, and he indicated to me that there was not a specific animal control kennel permit that's issued, but they do reserve the right to inspect the premise at, during business hours, and that a posting is required pursuant to the state code mentioned there, 3.2-5919. So as I mentioned, the property is about a quarter mile west of the intersection of Post Oak Road. I've indicated the property with a big red dot. The intersection of Post Oak Road and Lane's Corner is about a quarter mile to the east, and about a mile to the east is the intersection of Post Oak Road and Margot Road. The property and all abutting properties are zoned agricultural 3, have a future land use designation of rural residential. This is an aerial of the subject property. You can see the single-family home to the north, the existing kennel to the south, and some other miscellaneous structures. The proposed GDP depicts the existing dog kennel, the existing structure, the existing drain field, the existing fence. New parking lot that will be required. It would have 8 new spaces, one of which would be handicap accessible. Originally, the applicants had requested 2 driveways onto Post Oak Road, and at staff's request, have consolidated those driveways to just one access point. That. I already mentioned 50 dogs and 20 cats. Staff attended a open house on the subject property. It was also the community meeting. There were 3 attendees, one of which was in support, and 2 of which, a nice couple, were there, and they had some concerns over basically on-site management and waste management. In response to that, the applicant noted that a strict good neighbor policy will be maintained, in addition to some privacy fencing and noise-absorbing materials. I believe the applicant will speak on their management tactics and so on. They indicated that waste will be bagged and disposed of at a nearby convenience center. Staff has written 6 conditions and recommends approval with 1 revision. Condition number 6 is, I won't read it for you, but condition number 6 is proposed to be revised. This case, basically noting, that Post Oak Road is a lightly traveled road. This particular use will not create very many trips. We will have a site plan that will be required pursuant to that, but not a plat. And because there's not a plat, in order for the county to obtain a right-of-way dedication as we need, trying to provide the applicant a little bit of leniency on when they can make that right-of-way dedication.
Why would, this is an existing facility. They're not proposing any improvements.
Well, technically, they'll be improving the driveway, they'd be improving the parking lot. And those are the things that would trigger a site plan.
And a condition of ours is they have to reserve a 30-foot right-of-way for that? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, but at a future time.
But in order for them to get site plan approval, they would have to dedicate a 30-foot right-of-way at a future time, is what you're saying.
That would be accurate. The planning department can issue the site plan, and the applicant can provide the right-of-way dedication in the future.
But they can't do anything with that 30-foot space.
That's correct. It would be reserved for future right-of-way.
It's reserved for future right-of-way. Is there anything in that 30-foot space right now? Is there anything?
There's a driveway, there's no signage, there's no structure.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Patrick, that is a county code, correct?
The right-of-way dedication is a county code. And it's dependent, our comprehensive plan has the right-of-way, the ultimate right-of-way widths for various segments of road. Post Oak Road, and this segment is a 60-foot right-of-way. We have 0. It's Post Oak Road is just by prescriptive easement. This gets us moving in that direction, while also allowing the applicant some flexibility in doing that.
Another question, you mentioned the waste. Did I hear correctly that I presume the dog waste, the pet waste will be bagged and taken to a
The landfill.
convenience?
Yeah, the
center?
convenience center, the Livingston Convenience Centers,
Is that
not far away.
acceptable? Is that okay with, our solid waste folks that have to, because I think that's the county pays by the ton for the waste, if I understand correctly. Is that
Well,
acceptable?
to have them independently dispose of it without using as far as, you mean is it acceptable to have
guess,
them
yeah.
take it versus have it be collected?
Or disposed on site? I mean, I presume they're doing this because of the drain field. I would presume, that'd be my guess.
Correct.
I may be wrong on that. What about baths and things like that? Does that go into their drain fields? Are they gonna be doing this on site? or-
I don't believe.
Maybe
they'll-
I'll wait for the client, for the applicant, how's that?
I'd like to ask a
Sounds good.
question, please. You stated, it was, in your presentation, you stated convenience site, but then you stated a few minutes ago, the landfill. There's a difference. Am I correct?
If so, then I was mistaken because I thought that they were used interchangeably as a nicer way of saying landfill, the term convenience center, and perhaps I'm wrong. I apologize for that, but I thought that our landfills were also convenience centers.
I believe there's a little difference. Am I correct?
Well, there's a convenience center out there in that area, which is
There
not a
is.
landfill. It's just a transfer station.
But a landfill would be,
A landfill is a
Larger.
landfill.
Mr. Chairman.
Larger scope.
If I may just address that, because I met with the applicant today and talked to him about that particular thing, and they won't, in the areas, we do refer to the convenience sites as the place that have the green boxes.
right.
And then the landfill is considered the landfill. I guess it's just two different terminologies for it. But the applicant, and I'm sure he or she will address that after a while, but they plan on double bagging it and taking it to the landfill.
Good. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Apologize for
That's all right.
mincing those words. If there's no further questions, I'd welcome the applicant to speak at your convenience.
I did have one other question, Patrick, about the right-of-way. We were going to give the applicant a timeframe on that. I didn't hear you say what that would be.
Basically, we would expect the right-of-way to be recorded within 30 months. The applicant can delay the submittal of basically the plat that would dedicate the right-of-way for 24 months. That gives us a 6-month review window, which is plenty of time. However, in the event that we need that right-of-way sooner, that request could be made by the zoning administrator, and then a 4-month window or 4-month clock would begin.
Is that the most amount of time we can give them on that, or are we bound by any certain time frame to give them?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
It's going to be a recorded plat, if I understand correctly. This
Yes.
right-of-way dedication will be a recorded plat, so it's in perpetuity. So it stays with the property that at some future date, the county can come in and take that right-of-way. It's reserved for a future dedication.
Well, the reservation would happen,
It happens when they file the plat to get their site plan approval. They will have to submit a plat and have that approved. On that plat will be a 30-foot right-of-way dedication, future dedication. Correct? Do I have that?
Typically, that is the process, that prior to site plan approval, a plat would be submitted that has the right-of-way dedication on it. And then we'd be able to approve the site plan and continue on with the plat, and that's approved and then recorded. But in this case, in consideration of the fact that they have relatively lowered trip generation on the road, there are no programmed improvements out there on that road right now, we're trying to work with them and provide a little more flexibility because there is a cost to prepare that plat. And so we're pushing that time period into the future beyond the site plan approval. So this is kind of new ground here. So no,
Yeah.
there is no code requirement that we're leaning on there in terms of allowing the right-of-way dedication to actually occur into the future.
I have a question. What is the cost?
It would be the cost of a survey, and then there are county review fees. I would have to look at what those are, though. I don't know off the top of my head.
They can run $3,500, $4,000.
I think I think the applicant will probably address that when he talks. I think he has a price. I met with him today.
Why are we extending it 30 months? What's the reason for 30 months? Why isn't it 12 months? Why isn't it 24? I mean, how do we get 30?
Well, it was originally set at 24 months, and I spoke with the applicant about it, and they indicated that they didn't feel that was quite enough time.
Any other questions? The applicant.
Thank you for hearing us. My name is Mark Denoyer, D-E-S, capital N-O-Y-E-R, and I'm here along with my other two partners, my wife Jessica Denoyer and Ms. Lynn Bailey. If I can approach for just a second, I'd like to provide you with some pictures and also with Spotsylvania County residents site and the use that we're looking for with this. We think that what we're going to be doing is providing a service that will be beneficial to many Spotsylvania County residents. With regard to the Commissioner's concern concerning the amount, our earliest estimate has been $8,700 for the survey and fees. That equates to almost double the price that we would have to pay for the gravel parking lot that VDOT has said we must have. VDOT came to the conclusion that we needed 9 parking spaces to adequately equip 20 kennel runs. Kennel run is a run that has a pen inside and outside. And then between the two is a door so that the dogs can go outside, and then at night we can bring the dogs in. We will be observing the quiet hours, and we will start at approximately 7 a.m., and we will also have lights out by 7 p.m. We have a 28-acre piece of property, so there is a large buffer behind us. Behind us is also a 400-acre hunting area, and on either side we have, I'd say, about a half an acre of trees. So the only noise that could come out would be in the forward direction towards the street, but our house is located in between the street and the kennel. So we feel that there'll be a very nominal noise problem. I'm remiss in not thanking Mr. Patrick White and Mr. B. Leon Hughes for their assistance so far in us developing the plan and moving forward. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Howard Smith for coming out and taking the time to personally inspect and look around the place to see what our vision is. Briefly, you know, always a story makes something come a little more alive. We searched for, the three of us, for 2 years to find a property that was conducive to this service for Spotsylvania County. We located the Gish property. Mr. Gish was a colonel in the Air Force, and he married a German war bride. And in the 1970s, they built those kennels, and they began breeding champion German Shepherds. Now, prior to getting into this, I didn't realize that a champion German Shepherd can go in price from $4,000 to $8,000. And they did this from the 1970s till about 2009 and made a reputation throughout the Mid-Atlantic region in doing this. Part of what we're going to do is ask Mrs. Gish to help with the dedication of this and to let her know that we're planning to continue with her and her late husband's love of animals, and in particular love of dogs. We love dogs as well, and as anyone that is a dog lover knows, the dog becomes part of your family, and people want to take good care of their families. And so what we want to provide is a clean, healthy, safe, and fun environment for these dogs. We've also, within our plan, we've developed an outer perimeter so that the dogs can never get off of the property and run into the woods or anything like that. Our future plans include having independent contractors, for instance, once a week that might come with a grooming van. We've all seen these grooming vans that they use for dogs. And we thought that as we develop, we would offer someone the opportunity to come once a week. We're going to rely upon internet capability to schedule such appointments. Later on, as we develop and grow, we've also discussed the idea of a veterinarian perhaps coming out once a week and operating on the site. We feel that these are important things. Part of the intake for all dogs is to ensure that they have all of their shots, all of their rabies vaccinations, and there would be no dog that comes in that just wandered off the street, so to speak. But in the meantime, we would really, well, we hope that you'll look favorably upon our application and understand that there's only one other kennel in Spotsylvania. And that other kennel, we feel, well, we believe that our facility will be far superior. One of the things we're going to also do that's unique and different is we've purchased already a animal control vehicle from Oklahoma City, and they're very unique because they have a heating unit in the front of the cab and cooling, and they also have one in the back for the animals, and then there's cages built into that. And so what we plan on doing is doing, in addition to the doggy daycare, pickup and delivery. For example, at the Gordon Road commuter lot, we can improve the quality of life for many of our federal workers. Imagine Joe, federal worker, comes to the commuter lot with Sparky, and I'm there because that's how it works, is you're a lawyer one day and you're the bus driver the next. But I'm there waiting to pick up Sparky, and I take Sparky and put him in our van. I drive it to our facility, and then we can always get the VRE updates. So if Joe Federal Workers Train broke down, for instance, we could text message him and say, don't worry about Sparky. He's got a place to stay tonight. We're going to feed him dinner. He's going to be nice and warm. Everything's going to be fine. And we've relieved a burden on a family member, you know, because that's what our dogs become, is part of our family. We also feel that with our close location right here to the courthouse and the building of new apartments in this area, that we'll also be able to bring this service to apartment dwellers who might have dogs that, absent this socialization, this training, and these kennels, you know, would be a lot more anxious. You know, an anxious dog will gnaw on furniture or ruin blinds. Trust me on this. And so one of the things that happens from having a dog go to a daycare or a dog kennel is that they're more relaxed. So when they come home that night, they're a little sleepier. It's just like your children. You know, if they go to school, they come home that night, they're a little more controlled. I know that we've all had our kids over Christmas and waiting for the day that school goes back in session because they're ready to go. But we also believe that this service is something, as I said, unique, and we hope you'll look favorably upon our application. And if there's any questions, I'd be delighted to try and answer them.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I did. How did we arrive at 50 dogs and 25 cats?
The 50-dog limit is imposed by the state and through the county as well. At this point, we don't foresee actually having 50 dogs. it'd be nice, but at this point, we have 20 runs. That's the indoor-outdoor facilities. And our hope and our proposal at this point is to start with the 20, but to grow. Understand that dogs, many people have more than one dog. For instance, I have 3 dogs. I have 2 little wiener dogs, and I have a tree and walker coonhound. Now, those 3 dogs are happier when they're in a run together. So even if we have 20 runs, we may not use all 20 runs because some client might have 2 dogs, and he wants Spot and Rex to be together in this kennel run. And these kennel runs are wide and they're large. So each one runs about 20 feet, 10 inside, 10 outside, and about 3 feet wide. So there's plenty of room within them. Additionally, we've updated or we're in the process, I should say, of updating the plumbing. We've obtained our permits for that. Also, we have a master electrician, master plumber, and we've improved the heating and cooling systems to ensure that everything will be safe. With regard to the question of waste, there's a requirement of double bagging, and we will be taking that to the landfill. That, again, will be one of my wonderful jobs, is in addition to being a lawyer one day, I guess hauling that kind of stuff around is kind of part of the legal profession anyway. So it'll be nothing new there.
Is that a weekly basis or a daily basis?
Sir, that'll be on a daily basis. That's the last run of the night, so to speak. And one of the last duties, just before turning off the lights, is the employees have to, go through the lot, pick up what's there. Within the runs, there are drains built, and those drains go into a pump, and that's pumped into our septic, which is what was recommended and what is encouraged by the health department. What's going to be going in there is not fecal matter, but instead it'll be like dog hair or, in some cases, perhaps maybe some urine. We will be power washing the inside of the kennel on a regular and continuous basis. That's just part of the standard operating procedures.
Well, I would say you're going to be a busy man.
We hope so, sir.
Heard him saying.
But I do have one other question.
Yes,
What
sir.
happens, I'm for the dog kennel, okay? But what happens after 30 months, this right-of-way is not done? So what do we do then?
Well, we're going to take care of that, sir. It's just with the renovations that we're doing at this point, we would just like a little relief. The right-of-way is actually a covenant that runs with the land. So there's no way that we could ever escape the right-of-way, be it in perpetuity, as the chairman mentioned previously. Whether it's today or 100 years from now, the county will still have that authority and the ability to enforce that right-of-way. We're in no way trying to be non-compliant. It's just, you remember The Wonderful Life? There's this scene where Lionel Barrymore looks at Jimmy Stewart and he says, "If you close those doors today, you'll never open again." And they're standing there holding the dollar bill and waiting for the minute hand to hit 5 o'clock, and they make it. It's kind of how we feel sometimes, because every time we turn around, there's a new plumbing issue, there's a gravel issue, there's a perimeter fence issue, there's something that makes life worth living. And so we ask respectfully for small relief, but if the commission so demands, then we will do everything to comply as soon as possible with the fees necessary and the survey required in order to give our land to the county, which is what the right-of-way does.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Patrick, so just from my knowledge and understanding, so when we put requirements, such as a right-of-way, for an example, for this and for any other case, what does hold the applicant to the fire, so to speak, if a plat isn't recorded, property is sold, you do well, the business is sold, what is the recourse of the county to then go back and enforce the fact that the new owners or the current owners would have to go through this process?
That's a really good question. First off, our conditions are typically written to obtain whatever guarantee is necessary before an event. Maybe that event is a site plan approval, maybe a certificate of occupancy or certificate of use. In this instance, though, it's a little different because we're allowing the site plan to be approved and the occurs. The tool that we would use would be a zoning violation, and it would be issued from a code enforcement officer, and they would state that they're out of compliance with their special use application and be fined to the extent that
In that right-of-way, you said is a covenant to the...
It's a covenant that runs with the land, sir.
It
And
runs
I
with
know
the
that
land, so
it was
that's
enacted by the state legislature in 1930,
Right.
something or other. And so it's enforced, it's a state law that's been provided down to the municipalities throughout Virginia. So there's no getting around it, and there's no way it's ever going to go away.
So what you're telling me, the zoning department is responsible for the outlook to make sure this is done?
that would be the tool.
Does the zoning administrator agree with that?
Anything else for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody here that wishing to speak?
Signed up tonight is Trish Dinsmore.
There's a box on your podium. You'll have 3 minutes. If you represent an organization, you'll have 5. If so, please indicate so. And then when the yellow light comes on, you'll have 1 minute left. And when that red light shows up, if you'd wrap it up, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Trish Dinsmore. I'm actually a resident that lives behind the proposed property. First time we heard about it was when the yellow public notice signs went up, probably around January. So we didn't have an opportunity to meet and greet with anyone back in October. We have a couple of questions because we are concerned. With the special use permit, my understanding from Patrick is that it does not expire. So if the folks sold the property, that special use permit goes with the property. So we were concerned, will these conditions that are part of the special use go with the new owner of the property if it were to sell? And also, in reference with the special use permit, they're asking for a boarding kennel. Let's say they change their mind and they want to have a animal shelter, becomes a rescue animal shelter. Would that be allowed underneath this permit? My next concern was in reference to barking dogs. I know that there's county code or ordinances that are in place to handle noise complaints, and would those apply to this business? Would the same noise complaints, if we're woken up or we're being disturbed by barking dogs, would the same ordinances that are in place still apply to the business? We're also concerned about the increased amount of traffic that will be on that street with customers coming and going from the business. And I think he's already addressed it, but we were also concerned with how they will handle the waste of feces, and I think he addressed all of that, that his business will use the county landfill, and it won't go to our local convenience, which is just down the street, but he'll actually take it to the landfill. And I think that was all the questions that I had. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? That's it. Anybody else that's not signed up wishing to speak?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this lady just asked some questions. Is there some way we can reply to these questions, perhaps get them answered? Someone can answer these questions?
Well, I think we'll give the owner, the applicant, a chance to respond here, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. As I'd mentioned previously, since the 1970s, this has been a breeding kennel, privately owned. There have been German Shepherds on that property for the past 40 years. My response would be, if you didn't hear those German Shepherds over that 40-year period, then there's a good chance that the buffer provided from the trees would alleviate such a concern at this point. Sorry, what was was that the only
The
question?
noise levels.
Well, as in
noise
the
ordinance.
special use permit, the hours of operation are from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Well, what happens at 7 p.m.? Well, at 7 p.m., the dogs that are in there, the doors are shut, and they're within the cement block kennel. We've also put R13 and R3 insulation in the top to serve as soundboards. In addition to that, what happens is the dogs are kind of like kids. You turn off all the lights, everybody's in there, and you put on, I found that they like country music, but that may not be the case, but we've always put on music and turned off the lights, and I'm telling you, the place is quiet as a tomb. They go right to sleep, and then they listen, though, and they know the trucks, they know your car, and when they hear your car in the morning coming to open up, they get excited. I mean, I'll be honest about that, but it's very brief, and they're just happy to see everybody again. So I believe that the quiet hours enforced would be substantial and significant enough to alleviate any such concern.
I have one other question. Do we plan on breeding any German Shepherds?
No, sir. No, sir. There will be no breeding. That is not the purpose of this at all. This is a boarding kennel. Its sole purpose is to care for dogs on a temporary basis, temporary being defined as either daily or during certain periods, for instance, spring break, Thanksgiving, New Year's. Those are for boarding kennels. Those are generally big money, or well, not big money, but revenue generating times of year. And so during those times, we'll probably have, more capacity, we hope.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the legal staff. Isn't the Livingston District exempt from the noise ordinance on barking dogs?
I'll have to look into that. I'll have to look into that. I'm not sure, but I don't.
Unless it's changed in the last 4 years.
Mr. Tigner should be able to answer that.
Patrick, do you know the answer to that?
I know the answer to that. I came across that earlier today. Portions of the Livingston and Berkeley voting district that are south of two water bodies are exempt from animal noise. Those two water bodies were the Po River and the Northern Prong Stream. This property is oddly enough south of those two, and yes, the short answer is, yeah, the animal noise requirements don't come into play at this particular site. I can't explain how it got into the code that way, but you're correct.
And I have one question. Patrick, this SUP is strictly tailored for boarding only.
It's the use is for a kennel. Could that kennel be a shelter? I would say yeah, and yes, I believe so, unless we conditioned it accordingly.
Well,
Excuse me, sir. I'd like to respond to that. The requirements for a shelter are much more stringent, much stricter, and would require a different special use permit than that we're seeking now.
so you don't have any problem if we just tailor this to boarding only?
No, sir.
I've gotten caught in the wind twice since I've been on this board of
Overextending.
overextending the purpose of SUP.
Oh, no, sir.
And I don't want to go that way again.
No, sir. Now, a part of boarding on occasion will require, for instance, Miss Lynn Bailey has been trained to administer medicines to dogs. That's just part of the normal care for them. or sometimes you have to clip some dog's nails or something of that nature. So, you know, if they get a hangnail, because dogs do get hangnails from, you know, digging or scratching or whatever they do. And along with that, as we'd mentioned before, we would still be bringing in perhaps, as we develop, you know, a groomer perhaps once a week, if that's something that the clientele would desire.
Well, I don't have any problem with any of this if it's tailored strictly to boarding at this time. Thank you.
I think to answer the last question of Ms. Densmore's, which was the conditions of the special use, if they do carry with the,
They do.
so,
And I would like to ask a question, please. I believe that you, in your presentation, stated about inspections. Am I correct?
That's correct. The Animal Control Department can inspect the property during business hours at any time.
Okay, okay.
I do have one thing along that lines. You are going to get also kennel license, am I correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So,
A
am
kennel
I-
license is generally required for when there's multiple dogs at a given site. And part of that kennel license is they can inspect at any time.
That's correct.
Could I try and firm up the condition that it's just a kennel? Would you be receptive to just saying that it shall not be an animal rescue shelter? Maybe we can approach it from that angle? Because I'm worried that if we say it can just be a shelter and then they start, maybe one day they bathe the dog, maybe one day they give it medicine, maybe one day they have a dog training class. I just am trying to maybe focus us in on what we're trying to restrict.
Yes, I'd be amenable to that.
So.
but doesn't that, but doesn't the licensing procedure address that? I mean, the license, the special use is for a kennel, not a shelter. The shelter falls under completely different licensing requirements, if I understand correctly. So he would, if it's a shelter, I understand your point, is that it could turn into a shelter without proper enforcement. But I don't see, personally, I don't see the need for any type of condition on this because it's a licensing question, if I understand that correctly.
Well, wouldn't also, Mr. Chairman, I mean, with animal control going out there and doing the inspections,
Right.
I'm assuming we would know if the applicant has changed and has
Then it's
run the
its own-
shelter. And then he would be in violation, am I correct?
That would be correct. He would no longer be a kennel. He'd be operating a rescue shelter.
So there is a mechanism in place to make sure that doesn't happen with having the animal control doing their inspections.
Sounds reasonable. The reason I hesitate there is just because I'm trying to figure out, you know, where the line is. Obviously, an animal boarding facility, people are coming in and bringing their dogs, and in a shelter, they're abandoning them, or someone is collecting them and bringing them there. And yeah, they're distinctly
I'm gonna
different,
ask
so
him, that's why
I would
with
agree.
you. May we ask Mr. Tigner if he would add anything to this? You know, you're the zoning administrator, and you're here, and I appreciate that. Are there any suggestions or anything that you can add to this that would help us? Thank you for coming.
Yes, ma'am. I can tell you we don't have very many kennels. If there are some, they're grandfathered way before 73. I think this gentleman spoke of this place being used back into the 70s. I can't speak to what the zoning ordinance may or may not have required back in 1973. It may actually have been a permitted use. I mean, we were a population of about 25,000 people in 1973, and we're 130,000 today. So, I mean, things have changed a lot, and a lot of the rules have become more restrictive. That's why you see this type of use requiring a special use permit. And the reason it requires a special use permit is because there are things to mitigate, such as sound. I think the applicant addressed sound mitigation tonight. And also the waste material, it's not on public water and sewer, so it has to be addressed, taken away. The applicant addressed that. So I think the things that I've listened to tonight are things that mitigate the use. I think all the answers that were given to the citizens' questions were accurate tonight. SUP can be transferred in ownership. We are the enforcement agent, as the zoning office enforces all conditional use permits and all proffers for Spotsylvania County. So that's just some general comments. I'm trying to think if I think the accuracy on the Poe River is absolutely right as far as barking dogs. It's kind of a white line there across the kind of cuts east to west in the southern voting districts. So dogs can bark. Dogs can are used frequently for hunting and whatnot. The definition of kennel is a defined term. I think it used to say, you know, keeping, boarding, training. It's a lot of things in there that the gentleman can do as a definition of kennel. I think the strategy of having a disclaimer that it's not a shelter. I will say that, you know, there are occasions where I'm sure animal control runs into a bad situation where they have a lot of animals that have been abused or they have to take custody of. And I'm not sure what Mr. Tidings in his official capacity does with such animals. They also similarly run into large agricultural animals that they have to take care of that are being abused or not taken care of properly. So the comments that Mr. Tidings will be on the property, I am sure he will be notified that this kennel is in operation. And I am sure his officers do go out on the kennels that they know of, and they do make regular routine maintenance inspections to make sure the animals, number one, are properly cared for, and number two, that there's nothing, you know, suspicious happening on the property. This gentleman seems very honest and forthright. Mr. Tidings has run into some bad situations with animals in the county, even including dog fighting and things of that nature where animals are not taken care of properly. So that's not the case here, but I'm just saying sometimes he runs into an animal that's wounded, an animal that needs care and sheltering, and I'm assuming he has a place where he takes those animals when he takes custody of them. And it's a chain of custody, which is very interesting to hear Mr. Tidings talk about that. When he takes custody of an animal, he's responsible for that animal to make sure that animal is well taken care of, fed, watered, and sheltered. So just a few comments. Any specific questions?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you tonight.
Anything else? Yes, one.
Just wanted to address the concept of including in the condition a prohibition against the animal shelter. And I'm looking at the zoning ordinance, and it is a separate defined use that requires a special use itself. So under kennel, I did want to I thought it might be helpful just to read that one, because it does include breeding, so I didn't know if there was a concern about that, but just so you can understand exactly what it is, it's kennel means any establishment in which 5 or more canines, felines, or hybrids of either are kept for the purpose of breeding, training, renting, buying, boarding, selling, or showing for the purpose of sale or rental. So there are a number of items that are included under kennel, but it does not include animal shelter.
All right. If there are no other questions, I'd be happy to take a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the special use permit with the understanding that the applicant will meet the 6, I think it was 6 requirements that the county has asked for.
Second?
Second.
Would vote on the motion?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify, there was some discussion, and staff made a recommendation with regard to the change on number 6. I just want to be clear as to what the condition is for number 6. It's listed in the staff packet as 6 months, and I just did not know if that changed in the discussion, and I just wanted to make sure that the commission clarifies exactly what that condition is for number 6.
From my perspective, I don't have any issue with it. It is part of the covenant to the property. I don't particularly have a concern with it.
I apologize. I guess my question is more directed to Howard, is what does the motion entail? When you talked about the 6, it's your motion, so what, as far as the 6 that are listed, is there any change to the 6th one or not?
My recommendation is the 6, the 6 recommendations that county staff has presented to the planning commission.
And that, does that include the 6 months or no?
It does include it, am I correct?
No, I believe if you're looking, I believe you're wanting to implement the revised condition rather than the original. So, correct me if I'm wrong, the motion would be something along the lines of recommending approval with the 5 original staff conditions and the revised condition as presented tonight and displayed on your screen.
Okay. Can we have that so I can see see exactly what this is?
That's the 30 months.
Yes, okay. Mr. Chairman, all right, then I make a motion that we approve the special use permit with the 5 conditions that county staff has made and the 6th one, the revised edition.
Carol, you happy with that?
That clarifies it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Very well. All right, can I have a second on the revised motion?
I'll second.
Very good. If we could vote. It is passes. We've got 5-1. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next application, CA 15-0003. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Mr. Scott, your mic's not on.
Is that better? Thank you. We were asked by the Board of Supervisors back in the budget to look at the fees and to move the fees to 100% because the board is asking that community developments support themselves through fees. And so with that, we've been working the last 6-7 months to come up with the fees, and accurate fees for you. And I want to give a special thanks to Wanda. She did a lot of work on this. She was not an Excel guru. She has learned a lot. Jane Reeve for the GIS fees. Troy Tigner has done a lot in terms of efficiencies in his department. You'll see his fees have dropped. Lewis Watts, who has done a lot of stuff. Y'all don't review the building fees, but he's done a lot of work on his. And Chief Monty Williford with the fire department also reviewed the fees for the fire and rescues. Real quickly, what we did is we mapped out each process in the building, zoning, and planning. So every step of the way, we figured out what everybody did. We figured out the staff member and the time it took. We then figured out the salary range for the folks, benefits, overhead, capital expenses, vehicle depreciation, OPED, which is other post-employment benefits, which we did not include in previous years because that is now being required. And with all those things, we started, and this is a depiction of something back in March 2009. We've changed the process. We had a member of the IT department come in and map out each one of these steps. And if you notice in number 1A, you come out here, and A really gets divided down into very unique and specific tasks, in which each of those tasks, we determined the staff time and the appropriate staff member. We didn't take the highest paid member. We figured out who was the appropriate staff member to do that. And with that, we had the time to do the task multiplied by the cost per hour for that appropriate staff member. And so each little box that you saw, we can tell you approximately how much it costs. Everything's averages on this, so I just want to make sure we do not have it down to a science, because every process is different, because applications are all different. Some are very easy, some are more complicated, so we try to take the average of the process. And then for all the tasks that you saw, we added them all up, and that's how you come up with the final numbers that we had. The constraints that we have. First of all, the state law tells us in no instance shall we charge more for the fees than it cost us. So we can't arbitrarily come up with a number to make our budget balance. Second, we need to be self-sufficient. The board has required us, this board and previous boards wants these departments to be self-sufficient. So we have the balance of trying to be self-sufficient and not go over the state law. So we got this first adopted in early 2010. The first one to be adopted was the planning fees. They were presented on the March 9th of 2010, and they were accepted. The building and zoning took a bit longer, and the board decided to go at 80% of the salary range for those folks because the effect it would have on the building community. They wanted to mitigate that effect. So the board approved 80% with the understanding that in the preceding years they would increase it by 10% to allow the fees to go up slowly so they could absorb it. Well, come to 2012, the board kept the fees at the 80% salary range. And so in that year, the shortfall was about $352,000 for the general fund that they covered it for us. In 2014, and these are just two planning numbers, I apologize, I just learned this afternoon, $319,000 short, and then fiscal year 2015, it was $121,000 short. I will tell you, for 2016, because of the big Lidl project that we have, we probably made 60% of our budget within the first month or two. Is that right, Mr. Tigner? I think. In the first month, we had 60% of our budget because of one project. So 16 will be an anomaly. So here's real quickly where we were. We were at 38 cents. We've broken this down into a few things. Y'all don't look at the building fees. That is done by the Board of Supervisors. Y'all mainly look at planning. But informationally, I want y'all to see what's happened. Currently, building's at 38 cents per square foot, and we proposed it now at 46 cents because of a lot of different factors, including the salary ranges have gone up over the last 5 to 6 years. Also, the OPED, overhead cost, et cetera. So they've gone up about 27%. Now, what we've done in the past is we took a 42-lot subdivision, a make-believe subdivision, and figured out what it would cost for the development community, engineers and builders, et cetera, and it would have cost about $182,000 on the original fees. Now, it's $187,000, only a 3% increase. I think a lot of that is due to process changes from all of the departments, Wanda and Troy, and for the GIS fees. The big thing we're also doing now is doing electronic review, which is helping. It's not done a major thing for us. It's really helped the developers, but electronic review is making things go faster. Also, we did a family division, and you can see that's a 2% decrease. So you can tell the fees they're not all the same. There's been a big change in planning and zoning and GIS. And with that, that's a quick summary of what we've done. I know you have individual fees here. We have Jane, as you know, from GIS here, and IT and GIS, and Mr. Tigner and Wanda here. They can help try to answer some of your questions. But in general, we try to figure out each step of the way and figured out what the overhead and total cost was, and we added that all together to come up with each individual fee. So it should be fair for each of the individuals that come to our counter. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you.
Any questions at this point? Go ahead, Michael.
Brian, I have a question about the hourly rates that are out there as far as, will the applicant receive an NTE or a estimate for anything that may be hourly? Because a lot of it depends on the applicant or whatever the certain.
No, we've never gone to hour because that would require us to change our whole method and change it and the tracking of it in the computer system. So what we've done is take an average of what we know over the years, and we charge an average for every person. So each group, and they know up front what those fees are. That's what you have in front of you. They'll know what everything is.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because some of what I'm seeing here looks like the current fee was a set fee, and now it's going to an hourly fee. And that's why I was kind of wondering with some of the ones that are out there, unless I'm reading this wrong.
Well, I know there are 3 that we've added that
Okay.
allows the planning, zoning, and building officials to determine if there's not an appropriate fee, they will give you an hourly fee. Because there's times when we have this huge fee and somebody comes in and it's only like going to take 10% of what it costs. So they can actually adjust those fees. We want to give those individuals the flexibility to help the customers in case there's nothing that really fits for them. So we did add that. We never had that in the past, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
I will note that looking through the various fee schedules, at least on the planning side of it, many of the fees have gone down.
Yes, sir.
Which is great news. I'm very happy to hear that. And I was talking with Wanda previously, the per lot cost as well. So I applaud the effort, and I think this is terrific. Just based off what I see here at this time. Any other questions or comments from the commission?
One. Just a few minutes ago, the special use permit that was there. And what was the cost of that? You
Is that a
remember?
full special use? No,
I
minor?
can find it here.
8?
Well, the
1,000?
plat, I understood
the
the,
plat,
I
right.
meant the
Oh,
plat, the engineering fees to
Right, that's
for the
right.
plat
Oh, the
and
plat you're
survey.
talking
Yes.
about? So that would be a right-of-way plat. And that fee is, right now, it's, the planning fee is $1,460. And those are actually some of our more complex types of plats because they have legal documents with them. That fee is proposed at $1,480, so that one looks at an increase of $20 there on the planning side. And another fee that goes along with that is GIS, and that one is actually proposed to reduce from $920 to $580. So overall, there would be, under the new fee schedule, there would be a reduction in the total cost associated with that process.
Ms. Carter,
Yes.
part of that number that he was giving you earlier,
Yeah.
that 8,500 or 8,700,
Right.
that was part of, he was talking about, in order to do this, he has to have that property resurveyed. So he'd have to have a survey company come out and resurvey the whole
Oh,
property.
okay.
So that's part
Okay.
of what he was talking
Okay.
about, the
Okay.
additional money that he'd have to
Okay,
have.
yeah. I knew that, and we went like that, okay, that's fine, okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I make a
Yes,
comment,
sir.
We did talk to FABA about this. I've talked to their liaison and gave him that 42 lot cost and a couple of others. He was going to his board. I have not talked to him since then, but he seemed very favorable with the direction that our fees have taken. They are very supportive of the methodology, and they're very happy that it's very structured, and there's a reason why we're charging the fees the way we are. Of course, the inputs and the final numbers they don't always agree with. He seemed to be happy personally, not as favor as a whole, but personally he seems to think that they were going to be they're agreeable to the new fees.
Yeah, again, just a general statement. I really applaud the effort. I think this is terrific, because when I look back at, just a, regular everyday citizen that wants to subdivide or break off 3 or 4 lots and, that type of thing. By the time you add up all the fees and then the bonds and everything else on top of it, it makes it very cost prohibitive. And I think we're heading in the right direction, and I applaud the effort. I would like to think there's more work we can do, get a lot more efficient in some areas, but I also understand that comes contrary to regulations and things that we have to deal with today. So just a general statement, but again, I applaud the effort, and good work.
Staff has done a lot of work on this to get the fees where they are today.
Does this do we need to approve?
Yes, well, the public hearing needs to be opened and held.
Okay, it is a public hearing, so at this point, I will take public comment if there is any.
Mr. Dan Sandoval signed up to speak.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Dan Sandoval, and I'm actually here on the behalf of the Fredericksburg Area Builders Association. You didn't think you knew we'd be here, didn't you?
Glad you're here.
Bruce didn't tell you. Bruce sends his regrets he could not make it tonight. I serve as the immediate past president of the Fredericksburg Builders Association, and we do applaud the staff's efforts here. We like the majority of it. We have not gotten through everything. It's quite a cumbersome document to read all the fees and where they've gone and where they've moved. However, we did notice right away, and I guess this board does not look at the building fee, is that correct?
That's correct.
But we just want to be on record saying that looks to be at least a 20% increase to the building community, which is a little challenging for us at this time. And I believe the numbers I have in the state of Virginia, we're looking at about 20,000 houses a year being built in a normal market before the boom, but just an average market where we should average around 40,000. So we're half of what we used to be. So any increase translates into a little tougher job to sell homes and deliver those to our customers. So with that, I'm not going to take all the time, but I just want to be on record saying that we're not in favor of increasing any of the building fees. You know, again, we applaud the effort that the staff has done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is that it? We'll close the public comment section. And again, the building fees are not part of our deliberation. It's just the planning.
Yes, the fees that were included in your packet, which have to do with processes associated with the zoning ordinance, the subdivision ordinance. And what would happen from this point is that the building fees would be added in before it got to the board. So the Board of Supervisors would see the building fees as well as all of the fees that you've seen this evening.
So the motion would be to approve the fees as proposed? Is that what?
If that's the desire of the
If the
Planning
board-
Commission, to recommend approval to the board.
All right. If anybody has a desire to make a motion on this, I'll accept one.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we adopt the report from the county on the fees, on the planning fees.
I have a second on that.
I'll second that.
If we can proceed to a vote on that motion. It is unanimous. Again, I thank you for the effort. Definitely heading in the right direction on that, so that's good stuff.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
I appreciate you coming tonight. Yeah. So we on to new business at this point? Or?
Yes.
New business at this point?
Yes, and nothing was continued to March 2nd, so the Planning Commission could consider canceling that meeting since the public hearing that was originally scheduled is now postponed.
You want a motion on that?
So move.
Second, all in favor? Any comment?
I could come up with a presentation.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. That, unsurprisingly, is unanimous. Any other public comment on anything unrelated to the public hearings tonight? Hearing none, I'll take a motion for
Well,
adjournment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
sir.
have one question concerning public meetings or community meetings, and understanding that there's the two-person rule in effect for those. And my question is, since they are announced, since they are in print, is there a way that we can go to these meetings and not have to worry about multiple people being there on the Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors? Because part of the experience is learning as much as we can, hearing as much as we can from the constituents, the people who come out to these meetings. And I was just wondering, what's the precedence that's set for that, to where that can't be done, or it can be done if? How will that work?
The general legal requirements are related to the freedom of information provisions with regard to open meetings. And it's not that you all can't have more than two people go to these things. It just has to be advertised as, you know, a special meeting, and those procedures taken care of, which are basically, you know, notice requirements. So it's not that you can't go, it's just, you know, there need to be certain things taken care of. So if there is a desire to have that type of quote-unquote meeting where you all will be there, you know, in the same place, you know, for, you know, county business, planning commission business, then, you know, contact staff, and, you know, staff can take care of those notice requirements. I don't know if they ever have done that before, but I would imagine. No, I'll have to take a look at whether there's anything specific as far as setting that meeting that the Planning Commission as a whole needs to undertake. But assuming all the requirements are met, that's something that can be done.
In the
And
past,
that's a
I'll let-
cost, and it's a certain length that, I mean, it's a certain time frame that you
Right.
have to have that freedom of information notified. Am I correct? I mean, you have to have it advertised.
right, we do, I believe it's 6 days prior, we need to have that notice posted. And so we would need to have, I guess the question that I have is just whether the Planning Commission actually as a body needs to make a motion and vote to hold a special meeting versus just calling staff up and saying, we'd like to have multiple people at this upcoming community meeting, advertise it, please. So we did do that in the past with the comprehensive plan when we had some community meetings. The Planning Commission all wanted to attend, so we did set those as special meetings and we noticed them appropriately.
What is the county cost, I guess, for the advertisement, one? Do you have a ballpark figure?
It's a posting, and we notify the press, so it's staff time. It's not an advertisement in the newspaper, but it's.
So the county doesn't have to pay for the
Right,
advertisement?
right. It's a posting and we do a press release essentially.
Would there be anything wrong with whenever we have these meetings to go ahead and do that as a blanket? So if anybody wanted to come, they could come? Instead of have to do each individual community meeting?
You don't have to advertise that in the paper?
No. No, we need to post it at the planning offices, and we also send them to county administration, and where else, Paulette, do they post them?
The Marshall Center's posted, the Holbert Building, and Community Development.
So
Then I send it to all the
What-
press.
So why couldn't we just adopt a policy that we do that all the time, and that way we wouldn't have to do it on an individual basis, and if there was a meeting where more than two people wanted to attend, they could, and it wouldn't be an issue.
I think
I mean,
that's
is
excuse me, I think that's a great idea, because there's been one in the past, I can't remember what it was, but I do remember there was a meeting that I did want to go to, but there were two people already going to it, and I really wanted to attend. But can't you just, like he said, make it in the call, so to speak?
Well, I'm thinking that we'd probably have to make a motion to do that, but legally, can we do that? A blanket?
Again, I don't know, the items that I see as obstacles are, in the posting that there be a, specific time and place, and also just the general notion that the Planning Commission as a rule will advertise meetings, despite, any, given intention to have an actual meeting occur, that they're advertising public meetings where, just in case somebody shows up versus, people actually showing up, like, hey, we're going to have a meeting, be here at this place. There's certainly, at the very least, policy considerations to consider, where you're letting the public know we're all going to be there, you know, you're going to have access to us, et cetera, et cetera. That's why we're there, for a public meeting. But, you know, over however many percentage of the time, not, you know, 3 of you show up. So I think at least from a policy provision, you know, that's something that I would recommend that you consider. But, you know, I'll have to check as to whether that's something that can be done legally. The immediate obstacles are just finding, you know, again, the time, place, et cetera, and having those defined by the Planning Commission and set, rather than just have it as a blanket policy. I think legally speaking, that's the immediate hurdle that I could identify. But of course, like I said, there's the policy decision as well.
Right. Well, I understand that, but I guess my question was, when we receive these letters and the county staff receives letters about these community meetings, why couldn't we just go ahead and post that for those? I mean, it seems like it would make sense, because I do agree. I mean, those are informational meetings that it would be nice to have some knowledge of if you wanted to attend and not have to worry about making sure it got posted.
Yeah, again, I think it's the same issue as identifying those, you know, specifically, and having an act of the Planning Commission to actually set those specific meetings. I think it's worked well in the past where, you know, if there are meetings that you want to attend, that you let Wanda know, so that in case, you know, there are more than 2 of you or 3 of you, steps can be taken to make sure that's done. So that you just, you know, if there's a meeting you want to go to, you know, let Wanda know, and, you know, that way we can address it. But we can certainly look into whether or not we can do some sort of blanket provision and what that would take, and identify specifically the legal, you know, obstacles, if any, to do that.
And the 2-member requirement does not include a board of supervisor representative or anything like that?
No, it's just
planning.
the Planning Commission. So you could have a combination of, you know, 2 Planning Commission members, 2 board members, or any combination that's less.
But it does mean 2 board members, you know, only
That's
2
correct.
boards, same.
More than 2, yeah.
Correct. I can just tell you from my experience that it really hasn't been an issue to this point, and I think Carol's advice is a good one for now, is to, if you want to go to a meeting, notify Wanda or myself. I'm happy to facilitate as well. And then until such time you have a chance to look at the legal requirements of it and also the policy end of it.
Yeah, and that's I think the way it's worked in the past for the Planning Commission. That's the way the board does it now, that, you know, if there is any specific meeting where it's a very rare occasion where it happens that, you know, 3 members will want to go to something like that, that they'll let the administrator know, and, you know, they undertake the necessary posting requirements.
And I'll also be honest with you, from my experience, is the meetings that you have with the applicant are most useful versus the public. The public obviously gives you a good understanding of where the public is at, but for details and your input and some of those things, those one-on-one meetings are, in my opinion, the best tool. But to your point, let's do this until we have a chance to investigate this further. If you want to go to a meeting, either send me an email or Wanda an email. We'll certainly facilitate that.
Well, I really think that the reason there has not been participation is because that members have held back because they, you know, okay, the person who represents that area, they're going to be there, and you hold back because you don't know at the last minute. I might decide, okay, I'd like to go. Well, you might decide at the last minute, and I think we should have that option, you know, to do that. I really do.
Yeah, I think Carl will look into that, at least from the legal standpoint, and we can obviously talk about this. I'm not opposed to it. I just give it a chance to be reviewed.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think, yeah. Anything else at this point? A motion to adjourn?
Well, we did, but.
Did we?
No. So moved.
Second.
Go ahead and vote.
You voted no.
You don't want to adjourn?
Well, I thought I had known, and I didn't.
You did hit no.
That's what's there.
Yeah, what, no,